The lonely vampire spent Christmas alone, until he hired a new maid named Naomi. On Christmas Eve, the vampire planned to end it all. No blood, no fire, no more pretending to live. But when a stranded maid named Naomi knocked on his door, everything changed. That night, amid the storm and silence, he discovered something he thought he'd lost forever: the taste of warmth. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The snow fell heavy that night, thick, endless, muffling the world into silence. The mansion on the hill stood alone, a dark shape against the white, its windows cold and unlit. Inside, the vampire sat in his favorite chair, staring into nothing. For centuries he had seen every kind of Christmas: roaring fireplaces in royal courts, candlelit halls filled with laughter, the sound of bells echoing across frozen cities. But none of it touched him anymore. Every December, he locked himself inside, refusing joy, refusing memory. This was his ritual, his punishment. Tonight would be no different. The clock ticked softly in the corner, the only sound in the endless hush. He didn't eat, didn't move, didn't breathe. Then a knock. The sound was sharp, unexpected. For a moment, the vampire thought he'd imagined it. No one ever came here. No one dared. Another knock, firmer this time. He rose slowly, his long coat whispering across the marble floor as he moved through the hall. The air around him was still, heavy, ancient. When he opened the front door, the night wind rushed in, and with it a woman. She stood there shivering, her hair dusted with snow, clutching a small black suitcase. Her breath came out in pale clouds. Sir? I'm Naomi Brooks, from the agency. You hired me for the week." He said nothing at first. His eyes, pale as moonlight, flicked over her face. Her voice trembled, but not from fear, just from cold. "I can come back tomorrow if it's not a good time," she added quickly. "There will be no tomorrow," he murmured. "What?" He glanced past her, into the storm. Snow swallowed the road completely. Even his sharp eyes could barely make out the trees beyond the gate. "The roads are closed," he said. "You'll freeze out there." "Oh." Naomi looked down, then back up at him. "Then may I come in?" The vampire hesitated. For a moment, the part of him that remembered courtesy stirred, faintly, painfully. "Come in," he said at last. She stepped inside, stamping her boots, brushing snow from her sleeves. Her presence felt impossibly warm in the frozen hall. The mansion was breathtaking, but dead. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings high enough to swallow sound. Velvet drapes blocked every window. Not a single candle was lit. Naomi rubbed her hands together. "Wow, this place is beautiful, but it feels like a museum." He turned away. "That's because everything in it is already dead." Her smile faltered, but she didn't leave. "Well," she said softly, "I'll see what I could do to fix that." The vampire almost laughed. "Fix that?" As if dusting the shells could bring back what time had taken. But there was something in her voice, a quiet defiance he hadn't heard in centuries. He showed her the kitchen, then vanished before she could ask any questions. For the next few hours, Naomi worked alone. She moved from room to room, humming under her breath, filling the cold air with a faint melody. The vampire listened from the shadows, unseen. Her voice was warm, alive. He hated how it reached him, how it reminded him of another woman, another Christmas long ago. By evening, the snow outside had thickened into a blizzard. The windows glowed faintly blue with reflected lightning. Naomi had just finished sweeping the main hall when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then darkness. "Perfect," she muttered. "Merry freaking Christmas." Somewhere in the mansion, a voice drifted through the dark. "Stay where you are." She turned sharply. "Mr. Hale?" No answer. Only the faintest footstep, closer now. Naomi lit a small candle she found on the mantel. The light revealed him, standing by the window, unmoving, eyes glimmering silver in the dark. Her heart jumped. "Geez, you scared me." He didn't move, didn't blink. The candlelight painted his face in gold and shadow. You shouldn't wander this house in the dark, he said softly. Not everything in it is friendly. Naomi tried to laugh, but it came out nervous. Is that supposed to be a joke? He didn't answer. Lightning flashed again, and for a split second, she thought she saw something behind his eyes, something ancient and endless. Then the wind howled, rattling the windows. Naomi crossed her arms, her breath visible in the cold air. Well, if we're going to freeze to death, we might as well do it by the fire. She found a box of matches and knelt near the old hearth. Help me out, will you? He just stared at her. Suit yourself, she said, striking the match. The flame caught, spreading warmth across the room. The fire's glow reached his face, and for the first time, she saw how beautiful he was, pale, sculpted, tragic, like a man carved from memory itself. She gestured toward the chair beside her. Sit. I promise I won't ask for an autograph or a blood sample. That startled him. What makes you think I'm famous? Naomi smiled faintly. A man who hides in a mansion on Christmas? Either rich or crazy. Sometimes both. He looked into the flames. Both, perhaps. They sat in silence. The fire cracked, the storm screamed outside. Then Naomi said, Why do you spend Christmas like this? He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the fire, but his mind was far away. In another century, another snowy night, another woman's voice whispering the same question. Because, he said finally, the last time I celebrated it, someone died. Naomi froze, unsure if he was joking. But the sadness in his voice wasn't something anyone could fake. Her expression softened. I'm sorry. He didn't look at her. Don't be. It was a long time ago. Outside, thunder rolled across the snow. Inside, two strangers sat by the fire. One human, one not. And for the first time in decades, the vampire felt something stir in the ashes of his soul. Warmth. Or maybe danger. The storm raged through the night like a living thing. By dawn, the world outside had vanished beneath a white, endless sea. The long drive that led from the gates to the mansion was buried, the cars half frozen, the trees bent low with ice. Naomi stood by the window, clutching her coffee mug, which, judging by the empty kitchen shelves, was the only thing left to drink. The generator had died some time before dawn, leaving the house cold enough that her breath hung in the air. She rubbed her arms. Guess we're officially snowed in, she murmured. From the shadows of the hallway, the vampire's voice came quietly. You should rest. The storm will last for days. Naomi turned. He was standing there, the morning light from the window brushing across his face. Somehow, it never touched him fully, like the light itself refused. You're up early, she said. Or did you even sleep? He smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. I don't sleep much. She tried to laugh. Yeah, me neither. This house is kind of creepy at night. He tilted his head. Creepy. Well, she gestured around. No clocks ticking. No hum from the fridge. It's like the whole place is holding its breath. He stepped closer, his voice soft. Perhaps it is. Naomi blinked. Okay, that's officially unsettling. But before she could say more, a loud thud echoed from the far end of the hall. She jumped, nearly spilling her coffee. What was that? The vampire didn't flinch. Just the shutters. The wind pulls them loose sometimes. She frowned, still uneasy. I should check. No, his voice was firm, low. Stay near the fire. I'll handle it. And then he was gone, vanishing into the shadows like smoke dissolving into air. Naomi stared after him, her pulse quick. There was something about the way he moved, smooth, silent, too fast. She shook her head. Okay, Naomi, she muttered. You're just tired. Or maybe I should have brought that pepper spray after all. She went back to the fire, feeding it bits of wood. As the flames grew, the mansion seemed to shift, colors warming, shadows retreating. But she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching her from somewhere unseen. By noon, the storm had worsened. Wind howled like a chorus of voices through the chimneys. Naomi tried to make lunch, but the fridge was mostly empty. She found only bottles of wine and a few sealed packages she didn't recognize. Not much of a Christmas feast, she said under her breath. Guess billionaires don't cook. The vampire appeared in the doorway, as if her words had summoned him. I don't eat, he said simply. Naomi turned, startled. You don't eat? He shrugged lightly. Not in the traditional sense. She laughed. So you're one of those liquid diet health nuts, huh? Figures. He didn't reply. Only watched her for a moment longer before disappearing again, silent as ever. When she turned back to the counter, she realized something strange. There were no mirrors anywhere in the kitchen. Not on the cabinets. Not near the sink. She thought about the hallways she'd cleaned yesterday, also mirrorless. Not one in the entire house. Her brow furrowed. Weird. As evening fell, Naomi decided to explore the mansion's upper level, despite his earlier warning. The grand staircase curved upward like something out of a fairy tale, each step gleaming in the dim light. She moved quietly, running her hand along the carved railing. The top floor was colder, the air heavier. Dust clung to the furniture. But one door stood slightly open. Inside, moonlight spilled through the curtains onto a piano, and beside it a portrait. Naomi stepped closer. The painting showed a man and a woman, both dressed in old-fashioned clothes, standing in front of a Christmas tree. The woman was smiling. The man, pale, solemn, looked just like him. She leaned closer, heart pounding. It can't be. The date scrawled beneath the frame read, December 24th, 1891. She stepped back, the floor creaking beneath her. That's when she noticed the faint sound of music, soft, ghostly, drifting down the hall. A piano melody. Slow, mournful. Naomi followed the sound until she reached the study. The fire was burning again, though she hadn't lit it. And there he was, the vampire, sitting at the piano, his fingers moving across the keys with haunting precision. She froze in the doorway, watching him. The melody was sad, but beautiful, the kind that carried the weight of centuries. He didn't look up. You shouldn't be up here. I heard the music, she said quietly. It's beautiful. He stopped playing. It's not music, he said. It's memory. Whose memory? His hands stilled on the keys. Someone who believed Christmas could save me. Naomi took a step closer. The firelight flickered across his face, cold, unreadable. Did she? No, he said simply. She died trying. The words hung in the air like frost. Naomi's throat tightened. You really believe you can't be saved? He looked up at her, eyes reflecting the fire like shards of silver glass. You don't know what I am? Then tell me. He stood slowly. If I did, you would run from this house and never look back. Naomi's heart hammered, but she didn't move. You talk like some kind of monster. His smile was hollow. Monsters don't talk. They remember. They stood there in silence, the living and the unliving, as the firelight danced between them. Naomi finally said, You know, for someone who claims to hate Christmas, you sure keep a lot of ghosts around. Something flickered in his expression. He turned away, pacing toward the window. Christmas is when the ghosts get loudest. The storm outside seemed to roar in agreement. Naomi sat by the piano bench, running her fingers across the cold, ivory keys. Then maybe it's time you stopped running from them. He looked at her then, really looked. Her brown skin glowed in the firelight, her eyes full of stubborn warmth, the kind that didn't back down from darkness. He should have sent her away, but something in him ached to stay near her, to remember what it felt like to be human. Instead, he said quietly, You should rest. The rooms down the hall are warmest. She smiled. You mean slightly less freezing? A faint smirk touched his lips. Something like that. As she stood, she caught her reflection in a glass, but there was only her. The space beside her was empty. Her breath caught. She turned sharply. He was still there, but in the window, he wasn't. Her voice came out a whisper. What are you? He didn't answer. Instead, he blew out the candle, and the room fell into darkness. If you were Naomi, would you stay in that mansion another night? Or pack up and face the snow? Snowflake, tell me in the comments what you would do. The next morning came quiet. The storm had calmed, but the roads were still buried. Naomi found him in the great hall, staring out at the frozen world. You're still here, he said softly, almost surprised. Well, seeing as I'd probably die halfway to town, yeah, she replied, wrapping her coat tighter. You don't look like you slept. I told you, he said. I don't. She studied him for a long moment. His skin looked flawless, No shadow of fatigue. No trace of life. "You're different," she murmured. He turned toward her, eyes unreadable. "Different doesn't always mean dangerous." "Maybe not," she said, "but it usually means lonely." That word hit harder than it should have. Lonely. He'd forgotten what it felt like to hear it. As she moved toward the kitchen, her voice echoed softly down the hall. "You know, maybe what you need isn't another Christmas to forget. Maybe you need one to remember." For the first time in a century, the vampire didn't know what to say. He just stood there, listening to her hum as she made coffee, watching the snow melt on the window, and wondered if the warmth he felt spreading through his chest was real, or the first sign that he was losing control. The storm had finally broken. By mid-morning, the world lay quiet beneath a pale sky, the kind of white-blue silence that follows chaos. Snow shimmered like glass across the fields, burying everything in stillness. Inside the mansion, Naomi stood by the window, watching sunlight glint on the frozen landscape. She hadn't seen daylight in what felt like days. The vampire was sitting in the corner of the library, reading something ancient, a book so worn it looked like it might turn to dust if touched. Naomi cleared her throat. "Morning." He didn't look up. "You're still here. Still snowed in," she said lightly. "And besides, I never abandon a job halfway." He turned a page, his fingers moving slowly. "Admirable. Also," she added, "I've got questions." That made him pause. "Questions? About you." He closed the book carefully. "What about me?" Naomi folded her arms, her gaze sharp. "You don't eat. You don't sleep. You never turn on the lights. And there's not a single mirror in this entire mansion." He said nothing. "Oh, and let's not forget," she continued. "I looked out that window last night. You were standing right behind me. But when I looked at the glass," her voice softened. "You weren't there." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, he spoke. "You shouldn't pry into things you don't understand." "I clean for billionaires, not cult leaders," Naomi said, voice trembling slightly. "If you're hiding something dangerous, I deserve to know." He rose from the chair. The movement was quiet, fluid, too smooth, too perfect. We stepped into the light. It didn't warm his skin. It simply fell off him. "You deserve many things," he said softly, "but not this truth. Try me." His expression darkened. "Naomi, try me," she repeated. Their eyes locked, her determination against his centuries of weariness. Then he sighed. "Very well." He walked toward her slowly, the faint sound of snow cracking outside, the only thing breaking the silence. He stopped when he was a breath away. She could smell something faint on him. Not cologne, not metal, something older. "Do you believe," he asked, "that there are things in this world that never die?" Naomi blinked. "You mean like spirits? Ghosts?" "Not ghosts," he said quietly. "Something worse. Something that wears a human face long after the soul has gone." She swallowed. "You're saying you're—" Before she could finish, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the hall. Both turned sharply. Naomi's eyes widened. "The greenhouse!" Without thinking, she bolted toward the corridor. "Naomi!" His voice echoed after her, low and commanding. "Stay inside." But she didn't listen. The greenhouse sat at the back of the mansion, a glass structure once filled with exotic flowers and vines. Now it was half buried in snow. A massive tree branch had fallen through the roof, leaving shards of glass scattered everywhere. Naomi rushed in, heart pounding. The cold air cut through her coat like knives. "Damn it," she muttered, kneeling to move the broken glass away from the old flower beds. She didn't notice the ice beneath her boots until it cracked. Her scream split the silence as the floor gave way. The vampire appeared in a blur of motion, faster than her eyes could follow. One moment he was a shadow, the next he was there, catching her before she hit the frozen ground below. For a split second, she saw them both reflected in the shattered glass, and realized she was the only reflection. He landed lightly, still holding her. His chest didn't rise or fall. His skin was cold as marble. Naomi stared up at him, her breath visible in the air. "You, don't speak." He set her down gently, stepping back. His jaw tightened. The faintest traces of red flickered in his eyes, brief but unmistakable. "You're bleeding," he said softly. She glanced at her arm. A small cut from the glass. Nothing serious, until she saw his expression change. His pupils dilated. His body went rigid. For a moment, the civilized mask fell away, replaced by something primal. His hand gripped the railing until the metal bent under his strength. "Stay still," he whispered, but it sounded like a warning to himself. Naomi froze. "You're scaring me." He closed his eyes, forcing his breath, though he didn't need to breathe, steady. "I'm not going to hurt you." Her voice trembled. "You already did by lying." When he opened his eyes again, they were back to gray. "Now you see why I can't let people close." She took a step back. "You're—" "Say it," he said bitterly. "A vampire," she whispered. The words seemed to echo through the air. He didn't deny it, didn't smile, didn't move, just looked at her with the kind of sadness that belonged to another era. "Once," he said quietly, "I was a man. Then the night took me, and I stopped being either." Naomi's pulse raced. Everything inside her screamed to run, but her feet wouldn't move. Because beneath the fear, she saw something else in him. Not hunger, not cruelty, pain. He turned away. "I'll fix the roof." "Wait," she said softly. "You saved me." He didn't look back. "I caused this. Don't thank me for undoing my own mistake." Naomi frowned. "You didn't cause a storm." "No," he said, almost to himself. "Just the pattern. People come. They see. They leave. Always bleeding. Then maybe stop hiding," she said. He turned sharply, eyes glinting. "You think it's that simple?" She stepped closer, her fear giving way to something stronger. "I think loneliness is worse than the dark." He froze. No one had ever said that to him before. Not in centuries. Later that evening, Naomi found herself sitting near the fire again, wrapping a bandage around her arm. The vampire stood across from her, silent, distant, but watching. She finally said, "So how old are you?" His lips curved faintly. "Older than this country." "That's not an answer. Would it change anything?" "Maybe," she said honestly. "It's one thing to clean a billionaire's mansion. Another to realize he probably built it when electricity was still new." He smiled, not the cold, practiced kind, but a real one, small and fleeting. "You're not afraid anymore." "I didn't say that," she admitted. "Just trying to understand." "You shouldn't." "Too late," she said softly. "Already started." He sat across from her, his movements graceful, old-fashioned. Curiosity gets people killed. So does ignorance. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. The flames reflected in her eyes, and in his, they danced like old ghosts. She finally asked, "What do you do on Christmas?" "Before I came." He hesitated. "I sit here. I remember the night I lost everything." Naomi swallowed. "Her, the woman in that painting, right?" He nodded once. "Her name was Alara. She believed she could bring light into my world. She was wrong." "What happened to her?" He looked into the fire. "I lost control." Naomi went still. "You mean—" "She bled," he said quietly, "and I did nothing to stop it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Naomi finally whispered, "That's why you hate Christmas." "It's when I remember what I am." "Or what you were," she said softly. He looked up. "And what am I now?" "I don't know," she said. "But you saved me. That's got to mean something." For a moment, his expression broke, not with pain, but with something fragile. Hope. He turned away. "You should rest, Naomi." "I'm not tired." He smiled faintly. Humans always say that before they fall asleep. And somehow, despite the fear still curling in her chest, she laughed. "Guess we're predictable like that." Would you trust someone who just admitted to being a vampire if he also saved your life? Drop of blood. Let me know what you do, stay, or run into the snow. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. The mansion creaked and groaned, whispering its old secrets. She got up and walked toward the library, drawn by the faint glow of candlelight. He was there again, sitting by the window, looking out at the snow. "You should be resting," he said without turning. "So should you. I told you." He murmured, "I don't sleep." Naomi came closer, arms wrapped around herself. "You ever get tired of being alone?" His eyes met hers, ancient, haunted, beautiful. Every moment of every night. Then, softer, but it's safer that way. For them. Naomi shook her head. Maybe it's time you let someone decide that for themselves. He almost laughed. You're brave, Naomi. Not brave, she said. Just human. He looked at her for a long, long moment. And for the first time, the vampire didn't see prey, or pity, or fear. He saw light. And for the first time in centuries, he wanted to reach for it. The mansion was quieter than ever that morning. Outside, the snow had buried the gates, covering the world in blinding white. Inside, Naomi woke to the faint scent of burning wood and the soft hum of wind sliding past the windows. For a moment, she forgot everything. The fear, the fangs, the way his eyes had glowed red in the dark when he'd saved her life. But then like a wave, it all came back. The vampire, his secret, the truth she was now part of. Naomi pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and sat on the edge of the bed. She stared at the old wooden door, half expecting it to creak open on its own. But it didn't. Down the hall, the grandfather clock struck 9, deep, echoing, ancient. She stood up, feet cold against the marble floor, and made her way to the main hall. He was there, sitting by the same fire they'd shared 2 nights ago. His expression was unreadable, but his posture, it wasn't as rigid as before. The faintest trace of humanity had returned to him. Naomi hesitated at the doorway. You don't sleep, do you? The vampire turned his head slowly, eyes catching the firelight. No, not anymore. She nodded, pretending to be casual. Must be nice. Imagine how much you could get done. A corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. I used to think so. Then I learned that eternity is only beautiful until you run out of things worth living for. The words hit her harder than she expected. She crossed the room, sat on the rug beside the fire, and rubbed her hands together. You ever thought about trying again? She asked. Trying what? Living. He was silent for a long time. The only sound was the crackle of fire and the faint whistling of wind between the shutters. Finally, he said, every December I try, and every December I fail. Naomi looked up at him, her eyes soft but determined. Then maybe this year you need a little help. He frowned slightly. From you? Why not? She shrugged. You hire me to clean, but maybe I can do more than dust the furniture. Maybe I can remind you that Christmas isn't just pain. He studied her for a long moment. The warmth in her voice, the flicker of light in her eyes. It reminded him too much of the past. You don't know what you're offering, he murmured. Naomi smiled faintly. You don't know what I'm capable of. For the first time in centuries, the vampire didn't turn away. That afternoon, Naomi raided the kitchen, humming as she worked. She found flowers so old the label had faded, sugar sealed tight in glass jars, and an unopened box of cocoa. The vampire watched from the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You intend to cook in that kitchen? Yup. She dusted her hands. If we're having a Christmas Eve, we're doing it right. Christmas Eve, he repeated, as if the words were foreign. Yeah, tomorrow night. Fire, food, maybe even music. He raised an eyebrow. And what role do I play in this performance? You sit. You pretend to enjoy it. You smile occasionally. I'll take care of the rest. Her boldness both annoyed and fascinated him. You're either very brave, he said softly, or very foolish. Maybe both, she said, turning back to the dough. He almost smiled again. Almost. By evening, Naomi had decorated the grand hall. She found a dusty box in the attic filled with ornaments, glass stars, silver ribbons, and a tree that hadn't seen light in decades. The vampire stood by the window, watching her in silence as she worked. Why do humans do this? He asked. Do what? Celebrate. Pretend. Fill their homes with light when the world outside is dying in the cold. Naomi paused, hanging a star on the highest branch. Because light doesn't mean much until you've seen darkness. And maybe that's the point. You don't light candles because it's bright. You light them because it's not. The vampire said nothing, but the way he looked at her changed subtly, deeply. Later that night, they sat by the fire again. Naomi sipped cocoa. The vampire, of course, drank nothing. The snow outside had turned into a white storm, swirling violently against the glass. Naomi spoke first. "You ever think you could be cured?" He tilted his head. "Cured of what?" "Of this. Being what you are." A quiet laugh escaped him, dry, bitter, centuries old. "There is no cure for eternity, Naomi." "But what if there was?" she pressed. "What if you could trade it, immortality, power, for a single lifetime as a real man again?" His expression darkened. "You shouldn't ask questions like that." "Why not?" "Because I might answer." Her heart skipped. "Then answer." He looked into the fire for a long time before speaking. "I would trade it," he said at last. "Every last drop of eternity. For one lifetime where I could feel the sun without burning, touch someone without fearing I'd hurt them, and grow old beside a heartbeat that wasn't borrowed." The room was utterly still. Naomi didn't speak. She just watched him, the way the firelight touched his face, the faint sorrow in his eyes. "Finally," she said, "then that's our Christmas wish." He frowned slightly. "Our what?" "Our Christmas pact," she said with a small smile. "You don't have to believe in miracles. I'll believe for both of us." He stared at her, this mortal woman who had walked into his darkness and dared to speak of light. "You're strange," he murmured. "I get that a lot." The fire burned low. Outside, the wind howled through the snow-laden trees. Naomi rose to her feet, brushing ash from her hands. "Good night," she said softly, "and Merry almost Christmas." He didn't reply, but when she was gone, the vampire whispered into the quiet air, words he hadn't spoken in centuries. "Merry Christmas, Naomi." But upstairs, as Naomi drifted towards sleep, a sound echoed faintly from beyond the forest, a cry, low and haunting. The vampire froze where he stood, his senses sharpened. He recognized that sound. Not human, not storm. Something had found him, and this time it wasn't coming for him alone. The snow stopped falling at dawn, but the silence it left behind was wrong. Too heavy, too still. The vampire felt it before Naomi even woke. The change in the air, the faint vibration in the walls of the mansion, the whisper of something old drawing near. He stood by the window, his pale hand resting on the glass. The forest below stretched endless and white, but beneath the snow, he could sense movement. Something had crossed the old wards, something that should have been impossible. For centuries, he'd hidden himself here, far from his kind, far from their laws. But the moment Naomi offered him her blood, the moment he broke the oldest vow of his kind, never feed from the innocent, the spell of silence was shattered. He'd awakened attention, and now they were coming. Naomi found him still at the window hours later. "You've been standing there since I woke up," she said softly. "You look tense." He didn't turn around. "The storm has ended." "That's good, isn't it?" "No." His voice was almost a whisper. "It means they can reach us now." Naomi frowned, crossing her arms. "Who can?" Before she could finish, a sound tore through the quiet, a deep, echoing knock that made her jump. Someone was at the door. Naomi blinked. How could anyone? The road still buried. The vampire didn't move. His voice dropped to a near growl. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, you do not speak." Her pulse quickened as he strode across the hall, every movement calm, precise, predatory. He opened the door slowly. A figure stood outside, draped in a heavy black cloak. Snow clung to their boots and hood, and when they looked up, Naomi saw their eyes, crimson like fresh blood, glowing faintly even in daylight. "Brother," the visitor said. Their voice was smooth, chilling. "You've been a hard one to find." Naomi froze in the hallway. "Brother?" The vampire's expression hardened. "You shouldn't be here." The stranger smiled faintly. "You broke the covenant, and now you ask what brings me. You know the answer." He stepped aside, his voice low and venomous. "Not in my house." The visitor's smile vanished. "You drank from a living woman during the holy silence of winter. The council felt your hunger wake. They sent me to remind you what that means." Naomi's breath caught. She stepped out from the shadows before he could stop her. "Wait, remind him? Of what?" The visitor's gaze slid toward her. The little flame." Their lips curved into a cruel smile. "So it's true. A human. How quaint." Naomi stepped back. "Who are you?" The vampire hissed under his breath. "Naomi, I told you to stay behind me." The visitor's tone turned mocking. She speaks, and he protects her. Oh, how the mighty fall. Leave her out of this, the vampire said, his voice dangerously low. I can't. Her blood called to the council. Do you think they will forgive you for what you did? You've tied your existence to hers now. And that, brother, means she belongs to them. The vampire's fangs flashed. Over my ashes. The stranger smirked. Then burn, if you must. In a blink, the visitor moved faster than human eyes could follow. Naomi gasped as a gust of icy wind burst through the room. The vampire countered, his hands slamming against the air, sending the intruder crashing back into the doorframe with a snarl. Flames flared in the fireplace, though no one had touched it. Shadows rippled along the walls. Naomi stumbled backward, heart racing. The air crackled with power, real, ancient power, like the storm had returned inside the house. You would fight me for her? The stranger spat, rising to their feet. For a mortal who will age and die while you rot in eternity, the vampire's voice was thunder. I would fight heaven itself for one more heartbeat that feels alive. For the first time, Naomi saw fear flicker in the intruder's eyes. Then you truly are lost, they whispered. And then they vanished, dissolving in a mist that swirled through the open doorway and scattered into the snow. Silence returned, but it was not peace. Naomi's breathing was quick and shallow. What was that? The vampire closed the door, locking it with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. My past, he said quietly, and our death if we don't leave. Leave? She repeated, still shaking. Go where? There's no safe place anymore, he said. Once the council knows, they will send others, stronger ones. They'll take you, Naomi. They'll drain you until every drop of your blood is spent. And when you're gone, he paused, voice breaking for the first time. They'll chain me again. Naomi stared at him. Chain you? His jaw tightened. I was their king once, centuries ago, until I defied them, until I loved someone they said I could never have. Her eyes softened. Ilara, she whispered. His gaze snapped to hers. How do you know that name? You said it once, Naomi said. In your sleep. I didn't know who she was. He turned away. She was human, like you, and she died because I couldn't protect her. Naomi's heart clenched. So now you're doing it again. Locking yourself away. Punishing yourself. It's the only way I could keep the world safe from me. She stepped closer. You're wrong. You're keeping the world safe from love. He froze. You think hiding makes you less dangerous, she said softly. But it just makes you more alone. And maybe that's the real curse. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled quietly behind them. Finally, the vampire said, they'll come tonight. Naomi swallowed. Then we'll be ready. He turned to her, incredulous. You're not staying. Like hell I'm not. Her voice was firm, defiant. You think I'm going to run after everything we've been through? No. You saved me. Now I save you. That's how it works. The vampire stared at her, at the mortal woman standing in his hall, shaking but unbroken. Against all logic, he felt something he hadn't felt in centuries. Hope. That night, the mansion transformed. Naomi gathered candles, salt, anything she could find that looked remotely useful. The vampire drew sigils and ash along the windows, his movements precise and fast, his eyes glowing faintly as he whispered old words that made the air tremble. You don't have to do this, he said once, as she placed a candle on the stairway. She looked up at him. You said they're coming for me too. That makes it both our fight. The vampire almost smiled. You're not afraid anymore. Oh, I'm terrified, she said. But fear doesn't get to win tonight. Midnight. The first strike came like lightning. The mansion's front doors blew open, sending shards of wood flying. 3 shadows poured in, tall, silent, cloaked in black. Their eyes burned crimson. The vampire stepped forward, and the air itself seemed to bend around him. Naomi felt the temperature drop, the lights flicker. Stay behind me, he ordered. The intruders moved with inhuman grace, but he was faster. One charged, and in a blur of motion, the vampire was on him, claws flashing, the creature's body dissolving into dust. Another leapt, hissing, but Naomi threw the candle she held, and the fire burst upward, blinding it long enough for the vampire to strike. It was over in seconds, silence broken only by the sound of Naomi's ragged breathing. But then a voice echoed from the darkness. Soft, female, cold as winter. You always were sentimental, my king. The vampire froze. Naomi turned. From the doorway, a woman stepped forward, pale, graceful, with eyes like molten gold. Her beauty was terrible, ageless. Do you know what they call me now? She asked. The keeper of the blood debt. The vampire's jaw clenched. You were supposed to be dead. She smiled faintly. And yet here I stand. You took my throne, my power, and now you hide behind mortals. Her gaze shifted to Naomi. She's the reason your heart beats again, isn't she? Naomi's pulse pounded in her ears. Touch her, the vampire said, his voice sharp as steel, and you'll what? The woman laughed softly. Kill me? Again. Her eyes gleamed. No, my dear. The council wants her alive. But if she gives herself willingly, perhaps we can spare your miserable soul. Naomi took a step forward before she could stop herself. If I go with you, will you leave him alone? The vampire spun toward her. Naomi, no. The woman smiled. A brave little offering. So like Alara. Naomi's breath caught. You knew her. I killed her, the woman said simply. The vampire roared, the sound not human, not sane, and the fire exploded behind him, casting wild shadows across the walls. The fire roared behind them, painting the mansion walls gold and red. The vampire stood between Naomi and the woman who called herself the keeper of the blood debt. Snow swirled through the shattered doorway. The night outside howled like a wounded beast. Naomi could barely breathe. The woman's presence filled the room like smoke, cold, heavy, suffocating. You killed her, the vampire said, his voice low and trembling with rage. You killed Alara. The keeper's smile was faint, cruel. She was a human who dared to love our king. Her death was mercy. Your punishment was eternity. Naomi stepped closer to him, her hand trembling. Who is she? The vampire didn't answer. His eyes burned, fangs visible now, but his voice was quiet. She was my queen once, before greed turned her heart to stone. The keeper's laughter was soft, echoing. Oh, please, you betrayed me first. You took the throne, took the crown, and gave it to a mortal woman who couldn't even survive the dawn. The vampire bared his teeth. You never understood what the throne was for, and you never understood what eternity costs. She lifted her hand, and the air itself cracked, shards of ice bursting from the floor, cutting through the firelight. The mansion shook. Naomi fell back, but the vampire caught her, shielding her with his body as shards of frost slammed into his back. His skin split, black veins spreading like ink, but he didn't move. Stop, Naomi cried. You'll kill him. The keeper tilted her head, smiling coldly. That's the point. The vampire turned, his eyes glowing blood red. He pushed Naomi toward the staircase. Run. I'm not leaving you. His gaze softened, even through the fire and pain. You have to. Please. But Naomi's feet wouldn't move. No. You said you fought heaven for one heartbeat that felt alive. Then fight for this one, damn it. The keeper's laughter rose. Touching. You think love can save you. She raised both hands now, and a torrent of wind and frost erupted through the hall, extinguishing every candle. The vampire roared, meeting her power with his own. Fire answered ice, red light against blue, heat against cold. The clash threw Naomi backward, her body hitting the marble floor as the ceiling cracked above them. The mansion, his sanctuary, was dying, and still he fought. Naomi, he shouted over the chaos. Get out. She looked up through the swirling snow and smoke. I won't let her take you. The keeper's voice sliced through the storm. He is already mine. The words became reality. The air around the vampire shimmered, binding chains of crimson light snaking around his arms, chest, throat. He felt his knees, gasping, his body trembling. Naomi screamed his name. The keeper stepped forward slowly, her golden eyes burning. This is what love does, child. It makes gods bleed. Naomi's vision blurred with tears. Something inside her, Anger, grief, pure defiance broke open. She looked at the vampire, his body shaking, the light dimming in his eyes, and she remembered his voice by the fire, whispering, "I'd trade eternity for one lifetime." She rose. The keeper barely noticed until Naomi stepped into the ring of magic. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Naomi's voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. "Ending your curse. You can't even begin to understand the magic you touch." "Maybe not, but I understand love." She turned to the vampire, his eyes widening in horror. "Naomi, no. It's okay," she whispered. "You've been dying for centuries. It's time you lived again." And then she did the unthinkable. Naomi stepped closer, pressing her palm to his chest, over his still heart, and whispered something she didn't know she knew. Old words, older than time, the mark of a blood bond. The keeper screamed. The red chains burst into white fire. The vampire arched, gasping as light poured from his veins. Naomi's body glowed, her eyes turning silver, her voice still whispering the ancient vow, her blood merging with his once more, not as food, but as salvation. The keeper tried to stop her, but every spell she cast burned away against the white flames surrounding them. "No, you can't rewrite the covenant." Naomi's voice was soft but clear. "Then maybe it's time someone did." With a final burst of light, the spell exploded outward, shattering the walls, the windows, the night itself. Then silence. When the light faded, Naomi was on the floor, pale, unmoving. The vampire knelt beside her, his hands trembling. The wounds on his skin had vanished. The centuries-old cold had melted from his body. For the first time, he could feel warmth. He shook her gently. "Naomi! Naomi, wake up!" Nothing. Her pulse was faint. Barely there. He looked up, but the keeper was gone. Only a scorch mark remained where she had stood. Tears, real tears, blurred his vision. He hadn't cried in over 200 years. "Don't leave me," he whispered. "Please, don't take her too." He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering the same words he had once spoken to Alara, long ago. "Take my life instead." But the heavens, or whatever gods watch such things, had already made their choice. The fire dimmed. Snow drifted in through the broken windows. And as dawn began to break across the horizon, the vampire felt the first rays of sunlight touch his skin. Warm, not burning. He looked down, eyes widening. He was human, and Naomi was still. He stayed beside her for hours, until the light fully filled the room, until the birds began to sing. Then a whisper, faint, fragile but real. "Hey." She breathed weakly, eyes fluttering open. "You look different." A broken laugh escaped his lips, halfway between a sob and a prayer. "You saved me." Naomi smiled faintly. "Told you. Fear doesn't get to win tonight." And with that, she drifted back into sleep, peaceful, safe. The vampire looked toward the window. The snow was melting. For the first time in centuries, the morning light filled his home. He could feel it, smell it. And as he looked at Naomi, he realized something the immortal in him had never understood. That life, real life, wasn't about eternity. It was about a single moment where everything you'd lost finally came back. Morning came slow that day. The snow outside had stopped falling, and for the first time in over 100 years, sunlight touched the vampire's mansion without being met by shadows. The walls, once pale and lifeless, now shimmered with a soft golden hue. The fire had gone out, leaving only warm embers that glowed like sleeping hearts. And beside them, Naomi stirred. A soft breath escaped her lips. Her eyelashes fluttered. She blinked against the light, her body aching, her throat dry, her thoughts scattered. "Where am I?" she whispered. "You're home." The voice came from the corner, familiar, gentle, human. Naomi turned her head. He stood by the window, bathed in sunlight. Barefoot, shirt torn, eyes bright. His skin was no longer cold, no longer pale. The light didn't burn him anymore. It caressed him. She stared, confused. "You're alive," he said softly. For the first time in a very long time. Naomi tried to sit up, wincing. What happened? He came to her side, helping her up slowly, his touch warm and trembling. You broke the curse. She gave a faint smile, still half-dazed. You make it sound like a fairy tale. It was a nightmare, he murmured. Until you. He guided her toward the couch near the fireplace, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The mansion was strangely quiet, no longer echoing with old ghosts. Outside, the sun glittered against the melting snow, and the world seemed to exhale. Naomi studied his face, really studied it. He looked younger somehow. Human, yes, but also lighter. The centuries of grief had fallen away, leaving behind a man she'd never truly seen before. "How do you feel?" she asked. He laughed softly. "Hungry. Cold. Mortal." Naomi chuckled weakly. "So, Christmas morning, huh? I didn't think it'd come with explosions and curses." He smiled, the expression strange and beautiful on his face. "You gave me Christmas back." She looked at him, eyes warm. "No, you just needed a little reminder that life's not over yet." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the quiet crackle of dying embers. Then Naomi whispered, "What happens now?" He looked at her, unsure how to answer. For centuries, he had woken to nothing but routine, endless nights of silence and memory. Now the world was open, alive, terrifyingly bright. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't even remember how to live anymore." Naomi's voice softened. "Then we start small, one step at a time." She reached out, taking his hand. "First step, breakfast." "I'm starving." He blinked. "Breakfast?" "Yeah," she teased. "You know food? Pancakes? Eggs? Not blood." He actually laughed. A real laugh, surprised and awkward but genuine. "I suppose I'll have to learn." "Good. I'll teach you." They moved to the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows that had been shut for decades. Dust motes danced in the air like snowflakes. Naomi moved clumsily, still weak, but smiling. She found flour, sugar, eggs, all neatly stored. The vampire, still dazed by the normalcy of it all, stood by the counter watching her. "You know," she said playfully, "you could help." He nodded, rolling up his sleeves. "What do I do?" "Here, mix this." He took the whisk awkwardly, frowning. "I used to run a billion-dollar company, and now I'm failing at pancakes." Naomi laughed, and the sound filled the mansion with life. "See? You're learning humility already." He looked at her then, really looked, the way her curls caught the light, the small scar on her wrist, the determination in her smile despite the exhaustion. And for the first time, he realized what it meant to be human, to care so deeply that even the smallest things, laughter, warmth, sunlight, could feel like miracles. By the time the pancakes were done, the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and hope. Naomi slid a plate toward him. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. He stared at the food, then at her. "I don't remember how to pray anymore." "Then just be grateful," she replied. "That's enough." He smiled faintly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For saving me. For being brave enough to walk into a monster's home and make him believe he could still be human." Naomi looked at him tenderly. "You were never the monster. You just forgot you were human." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, children's laughter drifted faintly from the nearby village. The church bells rang in the distance, marking the holiday morning. Naomi leaned back, closing her eyes. "You know what I used to hate most about Christmas?" "What?" "Watching everyone else be happy. Families. Couples. All those lights. I tell myself I didn't care, but deep down I did. I just didn't want to admit I was lonely." He nodded quietly. "Loneliness is the hardest curse of all." Naomi smiled sadly. "Guess we both had that one." He reached across the table, brushing his thumb over her hand. "Not anymore." Her breath caught, a quiet, tender moment of truth. The clock on the wall ticked softly. The morning stretched on, and warmth filled every corner of the once-cold mansion. Naomi rose and walked to the living room window. The snow outside shimmered under the golden sun, the trees glistening like glass. She whispered, almost to herself, "You know, this place could be beautiful again." He joined her, standing close. "It already is." That evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, he found Naomi curled up on the couch, half asleep under a blanket. The soft glow of the Christmas tree, now lit for the first time, cast gentle reflections across her face. He stood watching her, a small smile touching his lips. The world outside had changed, but inside, something eternal had finally found peace. He whispered, "You gave me back more than life. You gave me a reason to live it." Her eyes opened, sleepy but warm. "You make that sound romantic." "Maybe it is." She smiled. "Then prove it." He leaned down, brushing his lips against her forehead, a kiss that felt like a promise, fragile and real. "Merry Christmas, Naomi." "Merry Christmas, vampire." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, gentle, forgiving. But this time, the lights inside the mansion burned bright. And somewhere in the silence, the ghosts finally let go. Sparkles, if love could truly heal centuries of pain, would you forgive your past to embrace your future? Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.